You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
Welcome into RBLR Lightning. My name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me is my line mates, as always, Joe Zamataro, Matt Gannon. Guys, welcome into the show. We got a lot of Lightning hockey to talk about. Can't wait to get all into it. Matt, how you doing today, my friend?
As always, I am I'm tremendous, Jake. Thank you for having me. It's always fun to be here with you guys. Some ups and downs, but mainly some ups this week. I'm good. I'm really good. Thanks for asking. I'll send it over to Joe now.
Yeah, really excited to talk about things this week. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, so it'll be a fun show.
You're absolutely right. We do have a lot to cover, and let's get right into the swing of things and jump into the show. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is kind of some injury updates and some roster transactions, if you will, as the Lightning have been dealing with the injury bug as of late. There hasn't been any major injuries, thank goodness, knock on wood right now. But the Lightning have dealt with a lot of minor injuries as Perbix, Cole Koepke, and Ross Colton all were out for the last couple of games. Bellemare was also out for a couple of games as well, but Perbix, Koepke, Colton all have returned and have now played at least one game since our last show. Bellemare, who was out for personal reasons, he is back as well, so good to see he's back in the swing of things. Seems like everything's okay there. And then Balcers is the one, he got hurt and is currently out. Cooper had said that he is going to be out for a little while. He was out for this entire road trip that the Lightning are currently on. Do not know when he is going to return. But the big news out of all of this is Anthony Cirelli, who was the Lightning posted a picture of him getting on the plane, which means he is on this road trip with the Lightning right now. There's been no set date for his return and not even, much talk about it, but Cirelli is traveling with the team, which can only mean you'd have to think that he's getting very close to being back. So, Joe, I'll start with you. How excited are you for Anthony Cirelli to come back?
Can't wait to have him back, and it couldn't happen at a better time. He's somebody that can really, truly be the heart and soul of the team when he's on his game. It'll be huge if he's able to make it back on Thursday. Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens.
There's been plenty of games, not so much as of recently, but like when we had our early season woes and slows where I thought, man, a real difference maker, somebody that this team needs right now is Anthony Cirelli, and we always need him. We always do, and just to see him kind of inching his way back, getting closer and closer. I'm not expecting him to play on this trip. They might just be kind of re-assimilating him, getting him back into the groove of travel and all that. I'm not going to expect him to play, but if he does, that's just an added bonus. But I want him to be 100%. Like Joe said, he couldn't come back at a better time. So I'm super excited just to see 71 back on the ice sometime soon.
I can't wait for him to be back because he's been sitting on my IR spot on my fantasy team for the entire season. So I'm ready to get him back in the swing of things and put him in my lineup once again here. But it does seem like he is close. Typically, when guys go on these road trips after being hurt, that means they're either playing or very, very close because there's just no point on going on a road trip if you're nowhere near to being back. And I think they originally said when Cirelli first got hurt or had to have that off-season surgery that he was going to be back mid-December. So it seems like he is ahead of schedule. Bogosian was already ahead of schedule when he came back. So Lightning do seem to be getting healthier. Again, knock on wood. Hopefully nothing else comes up. The biggest injury right now, of course, is Balcers, who is out for at least the next couple of games. I think they're hoping he's going to be back for the game on Saturday, which the Lightning will play at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But we'll have to wait and see on that one as we've not had any major updates there. Let's talk about some of the games that we had over this last week since the last show, and we're going to start things off with the Lightning and the St. Louis Blues. And of course, this game was on TNT, so we had to wait an extra 25 minutes for this one to start, but we did get things underway, and the Lightning absolutely dominated this game. Final score of 5-2. Guys, I'll say this now. I think this was, you know what I'm just going to say? I think it was the best game the Lightning have played all season. I think it was even one of their better games in recent, years, even not years, but like even since last year. They played really, really well in this game. They looked great. They got off to an early 3-0 lead. And then even when St. Louis started to come back a little bit, Lightning jumped back out in front, ended up getting that 5-2 lead. And of course, Braden Point, he got 2 goals in this game. And Andrei Vasilevsky was solid as well, just like he always is. So, Matt, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on the game against St. Louis?
Well, even with the 30-minute delay TNT decided to give us, I still managed to be a little late for this game. But I was on my way home, so I threw on the radio broadcast. And before you know it, we're up 2-0. So it was kind of a shock to me a little bit. But I'm like, oh, damn, I hope those aren't the only 2. But from what I could hear, from what I could tell, is that we just came out guns a-blazing. What really kind of consistent throughout the game is St. Louis. They're a physical team. That's been their MO for years now. And they kind of, not that they bullied us around or a little bit like that, but they kind of put the hammer down regardless. It was no match for the Lightning's tenacity. We really came out to play that night. Braden Point looked terrific. And that second goal that Alex Killorn scored, or the first Alex Killorn scored, but the second in the game, I just want to give a huge ovation to Nick Paul. He was tremendous throughout the entire game, just an outstanding effort from him. And I guess if I can give my cookies to a third person throughout the game, Victor Hedman, I think that was his best game of the season so far. I'm not sure if he got on the score sheet at all, but to me, he just looked like prime Victor Hedman. He was a defensive menace. He was keeping pucks in. He was feeding them to guys. He was terrific. Like you said, Jake, it was, if not one of the best games of the year so far. And there's really not much more to say about it. They locked things down when they should have. They did get a little loose here and there. But one thing that everybody begs from them is that they did play a full 60 minutes. Despite letting in 2 goals back-to-back, to me, it was still a full 60-minute game. St. Louis, they've had their downs recently. They've also had their ups. They're a good team. I still believe they're a good team, so I can't say much more about it than that.
Hedman did not have a point, by the way, in this game, but you're right, Matt. He did play very well.
He was +2 on the evening, and it did have shades of that first game against Boston where they came out of the gate absolutely flying. However, they were able to put 3 in, where that Boston game they were only able to get 1. That was the team that you need to see down the stretch. All the scoring came from the top 6, and Hagel's relentless forecheck. He had a huge game, really making a difference when it came to breaking up some of the rushes that the Blues had there. That's the Lightning that you look forward to. They got all their aspects right and come up with a big win.
I'm not going to lie, guys. When Joe, you mentioned the Boston game, how it kind of felt a little similar to that. This time, Lightning were able to finish it, though. When St. Louis came back and made it a 3-2 game, I started having flashbacks to that Boston game. I said, oh, no, please tell me it's not happening again. But luckily, the Lightning put their foot right back down and ended up taking that 5-3 lead.
Well, speaking of putting their foot down, it was Brandon Hagel scored – mental math here, 18 seconds after the second goal to really squash the momentum that they started to get there. And that was, I think, played a really large part in keeping them ahead with that 2-goal lead. And with the Blues really struggling to get more offense going from that point forward, it was a difference maker of a goal.
By the way, Brandon Hagel, 7 goals on the season. I told you guys at the beginning of the season, 30 goal scorer Brandon Hagel. He's on a roll right now. It's continuing. I'm sticking with it. Brandon Hagel, 30 goal scorer. He's been playing really well, and we just absolutely love to see it. Now, that was a complete 60 minutes from the Lightning, and it was a well-earned 2 points. The game against the Sabres, well, that was another story. What a game this was. I mean, it was just back and forth all over the place. It was 2-2 after the first, 3-3 after the second. Then it was tied 5-5 going into the third. Buffalo led 5-3 at one point. The Lightning had to come all the way back, and then Steven Stamkos wins it in overtime for the Lightning, 6-5. They end up getting both the 2 points. Interesting fact here for you guys. Elliott has been fantastic against Buffalo. I believe his record coming into it was 14-4-2. He had like a 1.9 goals against average, a .932 save percentage. He played really, really well against Buffalo in his career. It didn't work out as well for him this time, as he struggled, obviously letting in 5 goals. Not all of them were his fault, but didn't have his best game. But the Lightning offense comes through in this one to get them the 2 points, even when maybe they didn't deserve it. Joe, I'll start with you.
Well, as complete as a game that they played against the Blues, the Lightning really were just making huge mistakes, especially in the defensive zone against Buffalo. It was a really ugly game and really could show the dichotomy of 2 different Lightning teams. This kind of reminds me a little bit of 2019 when they wouldn't play very well for half a game and then somehow come back out of nowhere to win it. Elliott, as you mentioned, played really well, must have the Blues number. The majority of the goals that went in on him, I wouldn't really necessarily fault him. I think most goalies get beat. I'm going to leave it to Matt because I know he's going to want to talk about giving love to Tage Thompson, because that was one of that was one of the most amazing goals I've ever seen, especially for someone that's 6'8". I'll leave that for you, but good to see him come back, and even if it was just overcoming with raw offensive skill, they get 2 points out of a very ugly game.
Let's go Buffalo. No, I'm kidding. When I did see the Thompson goal, I didn't cheer or nothing like that, but I was jaw dropped. I was like, dang, that was a good goal. Like, I thought Point's goal was very pretty in the first, but man, Tage just had to one up him. Adore him. Enough about that though. This was a fun game. This is an unbiased fan great game to watch. To cover, not so much. It does kind of make you want to pull your hair out a little bit, turns it gray just a little bit, but what are you gonna do? The Brian Elliott record, yeah, he's been fantastic against the Sabres. Unfortunately, this game wasn't one of those games, but he'll still add another win to his belt against them. The first 3 goals he let in, I'd say, weren't his fault. They were kind of where the defense, all the skaters left him high and dry. The last 2, you want him to have those, but again, what are you going to do? We got the result, but the one Jeff Skinner goal, that one was a perfectly placed shot. You just wish Brian Elliott could just be 2 inches taller or something like that.
Fair to say Vasi would have been tall enough to have a shoulder there.
Yes, exactly. But again, Elliott stepped up when he really needed to. The last 2 minutes of the game, once it was back to 5-5, and especially overtime, Elliott was a rock. I think a lot of people kind of forget about it was Owen Power who took the penalty in overtime. He gets out of the box. All the Lightning guys are still in the Buffalo zone. Puck slides out to Owen Power coming out of the box. He's got a breakaway. Even though he does kind of bobble the puck, he still manages to get a quality shot on net, and Brian Elliott stuffed him. And then, only moments after that, Steven Stamkos takes the puck up the ice and seals the game. I'm happy with it. It was a really fun game, and of course, my prediction was, and I guess you kind of make it true, is like, wow, they're playing bad this game. They're really gonna come out swinging against Boston. I guess you could say it was half right, but it seemed like they didn't care so much. They chose not to care so much, which I hate that quality about them, but at the same time, I love that quality about them, because it's like, when they really want to, they'll turn it on. We saw that in the last 10 minutes of this game. Like, oh, shoot, we should probably try to win this game. Let's go ahead and win it. To me.
And you also, you mentioned Steven Stamkos, who was a hero in the end, but he was almost a zero because that puck came out of the zone and he completely neglected it. And that's when it got picked up for that breakaway. It's the exact same thing that happened in that game against Ottawa a few weeks ago. And it was the same play. He mismanaged a puck coming out of the zone, and it almost bit the Lightning. It didn't. Elliott made a huge save here, and it goes the other way. But I want to see Stamkos have a little bit more ice awareness when it comes to people behind him when he's on the power play there.
How dare you insult the greatest captain on the face of this earth, Joe? How dare you hold him accountable? He's amazing and it does nothing wrong. No, you're right though. He definitely something that you would think, especially for Stamkos, he'd be really, really good at it. But listen, at the end of the day, he gets the goal and he gets the job done. It's one of those things where, he scores and he's the hero, but if he doesn't score, we may be talking about something completely different.
Trade him.
But they get the 2 points at the end of the day, and that is the most important part for the Lightning. Moving on to the third and final game of this week. It's the game against the Boston Bruins. Guys, we circled this one in last week's episode and said this was the big game. Boston is more than likely going to be playing for the home ice record, which they were. We said that I think it was me specifically who said that the Lightning were going to end Boston's streak. Unfortunately, that did not happen as the Lightning fall to the Boston Bruins 3-1 is the final score. But it's funny because I mentioned, not the greatest game for the Lightning against the Sabres. And he actually played pretty well in this one against the Bruins, but this time they don't come away with any points. It was a struggle of a first period, but a good second period, then a pretty decent third. But Boston able to get a power play goal in the third period, which ends up being the difference. And then they get the empty netter to make it 3-1. But Steven Stamkos does get a goal in this game, and he now currently sits at 999 points. So the captain, one away from hitting career point 1,000. Super exciting for him. Cannot wait for him to hit it. But the Lightning not able to take down the Boston Bruins, and they remain the hottest team in the league.
That, as much as the Buffalo game would be fun from a fan's perspective, going back and forth and having a bunch of crazy goals, for somebody that really likes to analyze and watch hockey, this was an incredible game. They both teams played very well in terms of structure. It was the Lightning actually, they're playing one of the best teams in the league right now, a very, very hot team, and they didn't allow them to have many opportunities comparatively. And man, it does hurt though to lose one to Boston, especially getting that consecutive home start win record.
I liked this game. It was a good game. I'm not super disappointed, quite like the other Boston game we played at Amalie, where that one was just it took up half the show. This one, I really can't say much about it other than, Boston is a much better team than I had expected, even a better team than I had a week ago when we played them. It was a much, much tighter game than honestly what I expected to see. Like I was saying in the Buffalo review, I expected them to play a much better, well-rounded, tighter checking, back and forth style of game. And it was that. It was just, we got into some penalty trouble late in the game. Things just didn't really happen our way, and I don't think we were as cutthroat as we needed to have been. There were small mistakes here and there, but it was a sure, tight game for sure. It had playoff atmosphere, playoff implications, if you will. And again, just things didn't really quite fall our way. It was Nick Perbix taking a penalty in the third period, which really kind of not sealed the deal, but it gave Boston the upper hand. It put them up a goal on the power play there. Again, there's not much I can say. There's not much I can critique. I thought everybody had a pretty solid game. I'll spare Belmar in this segment because he's had his own issues here, but I'll spare him. Other than that, it was an improvement from the Buffalo game, in my opinion, just on how games should be played. But again, we lost. What can you do about it?
Yeah, and they really cleaned up their defensive zone play where there's a lot of giveaways, unforced even in that Buffalo game. If you do that against the Bruins, they're absolutely going to massacre you. And the Lightning tightened up quite a bit when it came to that defensive zone play, especially the outlet passes and getting pucks out of the zone so they can't extend those offensive zone tries. Like I said, it's an unfortunate result. It felt like a playoff game. You're right. But man, there's one opportunity by Corey Perry kind of late in the game in about the middle of the third period, that if he sinks that one, he gets a one-timer chance and just gets bested by Swayman there. That could have at least tied it and made it a little bit more interesting. But it's always one to circle on a calendar and look forward to, because it's going to be something interesting is going to go on.
I want to read this quote from John Cooper after the game, because I agree with you guys. I thought the Lightning played a lot better. I thought they looked pretty decent overall, especially considering they played Boston, who's the hottest team in the NHL right now. But Cooper, after the game, he said, quote, "It's a tie game in the third period, and you come in here and you want to take penalties against Boston, and you can't kill off the penalty. Shame on us," end quote. So Cooper not happy with that third period, especially that penalty. We were talking about this before the show started, guys, that Perbix knew he messed up when he took that tripping penalty. But Cooper, it's a side that I don't think we typically see from him very much, very verbal in the fact that he wasn't happy with the way that one turned out. Joe, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on the Cooper quote?
I mean, we've given so much love to Perbix. He came out for an injury for a few games. He looked kind of rough against Buffalo. He knew that was a bad penalty, but God, you'd hope they'd kill it off. The Lightning went 1-2 on the power play, and they were looking for calls. There's a few things that were quite missed, but Boston came in and got one power play and one goal, and that was the difference. You got to understand where Cooper's coming from, where you can't kill off one penalty and you're getting, two power plays of your own, it makes for a rough night.
Yeah, it was about time for Perbix to kind of have a little bit of a regression. I mean, I'm not at all expecting him to keep it up. Yeah, he's coming back from an injury and sitting a couple of games, but he hasn't looked perfect. He hasn't looked Perbix, if you will. But
okay, Matt, no, we got to stop you there for that one. Listen, I know you've come up with a lot of these funny, the Einstein line and stuff like that, but I'm going to have to stop you on that one. I cannot believe you just said that.
Perfect Kirby.
Pull the groin with that stretch.
Okay, let's get back on the rails here. But yes, I mean, was that really the only penalty of the night for the Lightning?
Yeah.
Yep.
There were some missed calls for both sides. I'm not
I see where you're going.
I'm not gonna sit here and say, they should have, they shouldn't have taken that penalty, blah blah blah. There were some missed calls for both sides. There were at least two. There was one trip on Kucherov and one high stick on Braden Point that both went uncalled. I'm not going to chalk it up to that. Yeah, it would have been nice to have those power plays, but I'm not going to disagree with what John Cooper said. If you're going to, because I think he knows that we got lucky with some of those calls as well. So I think that was also a bit of what he was saying in that quote there is, if you want to take penalties against this Bruins team, good luck, and you're not going to be able to kill them off. So I don't know. It was a little bit of shade. It might be, what the team needs. It might be what Perbix needs to hear a little bit to kind of, light the fire under him a little bit. Not at all saying he's bad or he's been bad, but he's not been the Perbix we've known for so long, all 15 games of him.
I absolutely love Cooper. He's one of the best guys to listen to in an interview. You'll get other coaches like Tortorella, who's I love in his own right, who spouts off a lot of nonsense half the time. Cooper, when you listen to him, he really draws you in. You want to listen to what he has to say because he's very insightful with some of his things, and in this particular case, quite candid as well.
There's a reason he's always voted one of the top coaches that players would want to play for if it wasn't their own coach. He's a fantastic coach. I love it. I love seeing that side of him and showing that, you may not see that all the time, but he knows when this team messes up and he knows he holds them to a higher standard there. Last thing I want to mention from this Boston game as well, there was a situation. So Jack Thompson, who is the play-by-play commentator for Jack Edwards. Yeah, sorry. He is the play-by-play announcer for the Boston Bruins. He made a kind of I guess I would call it an out-of-pocket comment. It kind of came out of nowhere, but during the game, he was talking about Pat Maroon being a heavier set guy. And granted, Pat Maroon's old nickname was Fat Pat. So, this is a guy known to be a heavier guy. But he started talking about how he maybe had a couple extra pizzas in between in the game and was, just making overweight jokes basically, or attempting to make an overweight joke. People did not take kindly to that, and it was all over social media, and a lot of people were ripping him on his Twitter page. And then Pat Maroon, though, being the legend that he is, after the game said that he is making a $2,000 donation in the Boston play-by-play commentator's name. It's for mental health and body imaging and all that stuff. So shout out to Pat Maroon for taking that comment like a champ and turning it into something positive.
I love Big Rig. We all know that. I'm a homer. And I stand with the majority of people that don't like Jack Edwards. I don't hate him quite as much as some other people do. I think I kind of finally understand his shtick, because that's what it is. Like, out of all the regional play-by-play guys in the league, Jack Edwards has a shtick unlike anybody else. We all know his name. We all know who he is, but that's kind of uncalled for. Like I always say, if you're gonna be like that, go to the radio. I guess it's not a problem with his higher ups there or whatever. But again, what a just perfect clapback. It's not even a clapback by Pat Maroon, but it's just what a response. I mean, it's professional, it's funny, and it's charitable, I guess. That's the best part of it all, is that, he's turning a, sour situation into something beneficial. So hats off to Pat Maroon. I mean, what a guy, what a way to respond. And yeah, Edwards, tough look, buddy.
I've said for years I would pay extra money for nothing but a raw feed of players getting mic'd up. And if you had Pat Maroon mic'd up for every single game with the comments that he makes, how he control people and get a response, the guy is hilarious. I mean, he is really funny. And this is just part of his personality that he puts out on the ice, hitting the Twitter sphere. What a great troll.
Good for Maroon for making the donation and making a lot of Bolts fans laugh and turning a positive out of that situation. Even though, the comment itself, wasn't terrible. There's a lot been worse that's said, but again, at the end of the day, I think what caught everybody off guard was that it was so out of pocket. It was just like, whoa, where did that one come from? But Pat Maroon and making a donation there. All right, now it's time to go into the RBLR Stars of the Week. Let's start off with number 3. Our number 3 star that we have selected, guys, is Nikita Kucherov, who's had 7 assists over his last 3 games. He has been on fire as of late, and Kucherov gets the number 3 star. Joe, you were the one who pushed for him the most in our pregame discussion, if you will. So I'll let you start on this one for Kucherov with the 3rd star.
Kuch is doing a really good job of controlling play. He's mentioned he's got those 7 assists. He actually also is now leading the team in shot attempts, or shots on net, actually. And I mentioned it last week. That's really going to change the way that teams cover him, because they're going to start respecting the shot, and it's going to open up more plays for him to make passes. We haven't seen the east-west play from Kuch to Stamkos for a one-timer in a number of weeks, because teams have been covering it. But what did we get this week? We got to see a Stammer one-timer that Kuch sends on the power play directly across to him, and I think that's all based on him taking more shots. 7 assists, looking pretty good. That's why he gets star number 3.
I think we really underestimated how much giving Kuch the A really means to not only him, not the team, and the fan base at large. I mean, that's an accomplishment. Like, even Patrick Kane, he might now because there's nobody else on the Blackhawks, but Kane's hardly ever had an A. Kucherov, it's a comparison I like to make between Kane and Kuch. They're very similar players, but enough of that. Kuch wearing the A has been, you've noticed a huge difference. I watched 2 mic'd up videos. One of them was Brandon Hagel. I can't remember who the other one was, but I have never heard him so vocal. And you can see it if you're just kind of like straying away from the play a little bit. If there's like, zooming in on the bench or whatever, he's kind of, pointing at guys, talking to guys, holding them accountable, asking them, or telling them what you want to do, where they need to be, just really starting to step up as a leader. He's always stepped up as an individual player, but as a leader on this team, he is now a veteran on this team. He is just becoming such a much more model player for these younger players coming in. I think he's really taken Sergachev under his wing. Now he's really rubbing off on Brandon Hagel as well. We've seen how much improvement from him since, from last year to this year, just from playing with Kucherov and being a little bit more vocal with him. The leadership aspect of him just so far this season is clause enough for me to give him the third star of the week. Now that he's already been putting up points, but like a madman, he much, much, much deserves that third star of the week for me.
100% agree with you guys there. Kucherov has been fantastic. So he gets the third star of the week from us. Now let's go to the number 2 star of the week, and that is going to be Brandon Hagel, who had 2 goals and 2 assists over these last 3 games. Hagel has been another guy that's just been on fire as of late. A lot of people talked about how that trade maybe wasn't the best one. It didn't really work out great. Hagel had not gotten into his form like he was in Chicago. I would say he is settling in very nicely now in his second year with the Bolts, but first full season really, starting to play really, really well. And it's not just on the score sheet, but he's also been making a ton of big plays in gathering in the puck. And actually, we even mentioned this in that Boston game. He had a block shot where it kind of shook him up a little bit. He poke checked the puck away from the Boston forward, got around him, got a shot on net, ended up missing, and then got back into the zone for the penalty kill and blocked another shot. So Brandon Hagel, fantastic job for him. He gets the second star of the week.
I think that's funny, Matt. I heard you sigh when he brought up that play, because that was one where you felt for him. He blocked this massive slap shot, and oh man, is he going to be hurt? And then he put everything out there in order to suck up the pain and manage to get that breakaway. Didn't convert, which would have been nice, but comes back, blocks another shot. He was flying all over the ice. He was flying all over the ice for the St. Louis game. He gets a goal and assist in St. Louis and Buffalo, none for Boston, but he was still a difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, he is up there for like the top 3 just hardest workers on the team during play. I mean, do you ever see him take a shift off? No. We'll see that from some of our stars. Like I was just going on about Kuch. Sometimes you see him, he'll get a little bit lazy. Stamkos, he just kind of doesn't have that awareness occasionally. Brandon Hagel, I mean, man, does he ever just try to work for every bit of possession, winning board battles, just every single thing he can do to give his team the slight edge. And now that, consistently so far this year, it's been translating to helping his team out, helping his line mates out, and getting pucks in the net, or at least just keeping play flowing. So again, he's been nothing short of terrific so far this week, especially this year. He gets my vote for second star.
He's been reminding me more and more of Marty St. Louis, or really, Marty, not in the offensive ability, but Marty was such a great forechecker, and his ability to come up with 50-50 pucks, or even Tyler Johnson, for instance, who started a smaller guy that would go in and really win some board battles and extend play. He's been doing great since he's really developed himself on that top line.
You guys know that when it comes to jerseys and stuff, I like to have my name on the back and my number, but Brandon Hagel is a player that I wouldn't hate getting a jersey of, because he's been fantastic. I really loved him ever since he's come over to the Bulls. I've kind of been a Brandon Hagel, number 1 fan club ever since he's come over and talking about him all the time, but well-deserved second star of the week. And with that, let's go to 1 star that we selected for this week, and that is going to be none other than the man himself, Brayden Point. 4 goals and 2 assists over his last 3 games. He has been on another level, just dancing through multiple defenders, getting to the front of the net, getting pucks on net, scoring goals, picking up assists. He's been doing it all. Brayden Point, he gets the first star of the week.
Brayden Point has had a lot of success on the power play, but not all of these goals were power play goals. He gets 2 on the power play against Buffalo, so those both were. He gets 1 on his own in St. Louis, where he makes an absolutely fantastic move to the front of the net. But also the assists that he's making. That line is just so complete right now, and his speed, ability to enter the zone, It's been almost magical to watch. His assist in Boston, he gets the puck over to Kucherov when I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kucherov sent it to him as the scoring threat in that bumper position. He sends it back over to Kuch, and then Kuch is when he does that cross ice pass over to Stamkos for a one timer. He's integral part of really creating chaos in the offensive zone, and had an outstanding week.
A healthy Braden Point is a dangerous Braden Point, and now that he really has found his game again, I don't think he was perfect the first 5 games of the year. Still kind of trying to find his skill set. You know, he missed so much time in the playoffs. Seeing a healthy Braden Point just puts a smile on my face. And man, he ever just, you know, took that and ran with it this year. Is this his first time being a star this year? For us?
I have to go back and look, but I believe it is.
It might be, which I'm surprised it took this long. But, you know, again, he's just always eternally underrated. He will be till the end of time. But, man, he's just not that he's proving me wrong. I didn't ever really doubt him, but I was starting to maybe consider it. Like, man, maybe he's not, you know, who he was, whatever. No, he still is. He's just been driving play. He's got exactly what this team kind of lacks, it seems like, which is speed. He's one of the fastest guys on skates in the entire league. I'd put him top 3, you know, next to McDavid and whoever else you want. Just seeing a healthy Braden Point, really starting to just get on there. Good for him. Happy for him. I guess he was a star earlier this year, but again, you know, we'll scratch that. Don't mind that.
You mentioned him being healthy. It's funny how you take that for granted. Him being healthy when he wasn't able to use that speed, he just wouldn't have the entries. He wouldn't have the puck handling. It's funny when you start skating faster, puck handling becomes infinitely more difficult. But when he's not able to really utilize his speed, his hands don't seem to be there quite as much, and he's not generating the opportunities. You said it best, Matt. He's healthy, and he's absolutely dangerous, deadly dangerous when he's using that speed.
I have a question. When do we start talking about Braden Point in the Selke conversation? Because I'm all for it. I mean, I love Anthony Cirelli, but of course, you know, we can't really have that conversation this year, and I don't think it'll really start this year. It's possible, but when do we start talking about Braden Point in the Selke conversation? Because to me, I think he's as responsible of a forward as possible. He's not getting all of those major, you know, defensive zone opportunities or anything like that, but you'll still see him out there in just kind of some pressure cooker situations. And man, if there's only one defenseman back who is trying to cover a 2-on-0, who's the first guy back? It's Braden Point. It's not any of the other defensemen. It's Braden Point. He uses his speed to his defensive advantage, not only his offensive advantage. If we keep seeing that, we saw it a lot last year in the Toronto series up until Game 7. He was covering guys. He had Matthews kind of on lockdown. Same thing with Marner. He had his guys. I'm ready to start bringing that into the ethos here. Braden Point for Selke.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets the attention, you know, from other. He seems such a forward guy around the rest of the league, and there's so many talented, you know, two-way forwards. But I think you make a good point. I think he could definitely be in that conversation. You know, Anthony Cirelli is a guy that's, you know, been a really good two-way forward that has been close to top 5 in the Selke voting a couple of times. So obviously he's been out for a while, and Braden Point's kind of had to pick up that role a little bit. So I do agree with you, and it'd be interesting to see if he gets any attention as we get into the later parts of the season.
I could also be wearing my rose-colored glasses with that as well, but that's just my take on it.
Well, you know what? Let's throw it to the listeners. Let us know at RBLR Sports what do you guys think on that take by Matt? Should Point be considered up there in the Selke voting? Also, you can let us know too on if you were done any different 3 stars of the week. Any of your thoughts? We'd love to hear them. Give us a follow at RBLR Sports and let us know your thoughts there. All right, let's go into some of the big topics for this week. The first one we got to talk about is the bottom 6. We've had a lot of positives to talk about today. We've been kind of going at the top 6 in the game recaps, mentioning how they've been the ones scoring a majority of the points. And Joe, I'll start with you because you were the one who were mentioning this first. Bottom 6 hasn't been playing up to par. What are your thoughts on this one?
We may have seen a little bit repetitive in selecting the bolts of the week. and it's kind of for a reason. We've got our top six. Perbix has been a notable standout, and Kucherov has on the defensive end, but there's not really a whole heck of a lot to talk about for our bottom six players. Perry has had a couple of good games or some big goals, but really outside of that, it almost has looked like a disaster in my opinion. You really need some ancillary scoring beyond your top six in order to make a deep run in the playoffs. You need to have a team that can really grind it out. We've seen a few shifts actually in the Boston game. I would say that there is a couple of shifts that, Maroon was out there and Belmar was out there grinding down Boston. But outside of that, there's not really much to speak of. If you look at them by the numbers, and I like to look at stats because I think that it doesn't tell you the whole game, but it gives you a decent idea of tendencies through a number of games. Belmar's got a total of 6 shots on net, 2 assists. He's -4. Maroon's got 18 shots, not horrible, and had a goal called off. He's -5. Perry's got 43 shots, 3 goals, 3 assists. He's -6. Perry of the bottom 6 is the one that's playing by far the best. If you look at where we're at, though, I'm a little bit concerned. I've called out Belmar a few times. I think in the Boston game for that number 2 goal that he missed his assignment when the puck went behind the net. He should have jumped out to the slot to cover Taylor Hall. And there's been a lot of times where I've seen Belmar make plays that I'm really not satisfied with. At least if you're scoring, you can kind of cover that up. The bottom 6 is where I'm really concerned. At least we do have some hope with Cirelli coming back. We have some hope with Balsers, who's unfortunately been injured, but that can shake things up too. I feel like we might even need to see a trade in order to really get this team to be playing complete. I can rant on this for forever, but I'll let Matt chime in here.
I agree that it is a growing concern, and yeah, with the whole Belmar situation last year, I would always chalk it up to, if he did make kind of boneheaded offensive plays or whatever, I'm like, well, he's so good defensively. This year, it just hasn't been him. I'm the last person on earth that wants to, point fingers at him and say you got to do better. Again, who am I to talk? But he is kind of the glaring weakness there, is he not? Like you're supposed to be one of the team's best penalty killers, and we're not seeing that. You're just not being as responsible as you should have been. And that's not the only issue. I mean, they are getting kind of outworked, outsped. They're not getting out-muscled, but it's really the third line where I'm starting to kind of grow where my concerns are growing from is Nemesnikov. To me, he just isn't really passing for me. Colton, he can only do so much by himself, and then who's the third guy on the third line? It's kind of been a rotating cast. So I feel like once Anthony Cirelli comes back, he'll probably start, he'll probably stay and start on the third line there, and he will bring a certain sense of comfort and structure along to those guys that he's playing with. I think we can go ahead and assume that Colton and Nemesnikov are kind of going to be his line mates, his wingers on that line. I think once he comes back and gets comfortable, we'll start to see some of the issues iron itself out. But as far as the fourth line, I think that's where we're going to start seeing the rotating cast there. Because, again, if Belmar's not doing it, again, we know Cooper loves his guys, and Belmar's one of his guys, but how long can we be doing this? And even Pat Maroon, I think Corey Perry, you can kind of leave him out of the conversation. We know he's a playoff beast, and I know you can't always rely on that and just wait for the playoffs or whatever, but he's still got game left in him. But I really don't know where to start. I just only know where and how to hope for what changes.
Well, you mentioned that, Cirelli could shore up Nemesnikov and Colton. I don't really have so much of a problem with Colton's game, mostly because that he can do better, and he is limited with who's around him. Nemesnikov needs to start getting hot. He needs to start playing. So let's say that Cirelli does shore up the third line, and we're really only talking about a bottom 4, or I'm sorry, the fourth line as an issue. Perry plays a role, Maroon plays a role, but are they starting to get to a point where they might be kind of playing the same agitator role without putting in enough to really justify having both of them on the ice?
I'm going to take a different approach here. Kind of disagree with you guys a little bit. You're right in that this when you look at the stats, especially, it's not good for the bottom six. They definitely had their fair share of issues, but I'm not worried about them kind of at all. Nemestikov is the biggest one for me that struggled and definitely hasn't been able, and he's been snake bitten all year, it feels like, after such a good preseason too. I don't know what's going on with him. But, talking about like the fourth line, Joe, you just mentioned, these guys are playing these roles, but are they putting up points? Perry, he's played pretty well these last couple of games. He has a goal. I actually even argued for him to be on the third star of the week this time around. But Maroon, he almost had a goal as well. He nearly scored, I believe it was that St. Louis game, and he just missed the shot. He was looking at the rafters on that one. He knew he missed it. But, again, Maroon and Perry are these tough guy roles that you have to have, even when they're not putting up a ton of points that maybe you would like to see. I think people are used to the Lightning being this high offensive power team, and when guys aren't scoring, you start to take notice of it more. But also, when your top six is playing this well as it is for the Lightning, you don't need those bottom six guys to be putting pucks in nets constantly. Sure, it'd be nice, but I think overall, I don't think it's been that bad. I think there are some things to watch. And the thing is, for me, this is the big reason I'm not overly concerned about it. I think injuries have really killed the Lightning on the bottom six. I talk about this all the time. Chemistry is a very underrated thing that I think gets overlooked a lot. Like when guys, go into a new team after a trade, that can really change a guy's career or his season when they're playing with these new guys. They got to get acclimated, all that kind of stuff. And when you're constantly subbing in guys in and out, that doesn't help. Balsers, you guys mentioned him. I think he's going to be a big help to this bottom six. Unfortunately, is dealing with the injury right now, but he was really good when he first came in. You guys both mentioned Anthony Cirelli coming back here soon. I think if the bottom six can get some consistent playing time, I think they'll get out of this little slump that they're in and start playing well. I'm not overly concerned about it personally.
One thing I want to disagree with you about, you put that really well, Jake, but one thing I do want to disagree with you about is like, yeah, you really don't need that bottom six scoring when your top two lines are rolling like a steamroller. But come playoff time, you're going to want to be able to roll out four lines in waves like that. Because if you get one team and one good line on one team that can neutralize that Einstein line or that second line with whoever's going to be on it by playoff time, but right now, I mean, Stamkos, Paul, and Killorn, they look fantastic. You get one or two good lines on a team in a matchup that can neutralize those guys, you're going to want to have some reliable depth scoring. And I'm not at all saying that these guys aren't equipped or capable to do so, but that's why I'm not super worried about it right now. I'm just kind of stating my concern, like, yeah, I hope they get it going, but until I see otherwise, I am kind of starting to grow that concern until something does prove me wrong. That's the only thing that I kind of have a bone to pick with you about in that, what you just said. Other than that, I think you put it rather well.
No, you're right, Matt, in saying that, when come playoff time, you need all four of your lines going. It's how the Lightning have gotten to the finals 3 years in a row, but it's the end of November. So that's why it's not a huge, if this was closer to playoff time, I think it'd be more of a bigger concern for me. But you are right. You do need all four of those lines rolling. I think once they get some consistency, Cirelli, Balsers back, it would be good. Joe, we kind of mentioned this earlier. You were talking about it, that, maybe a trade. ABB has not played super well. He hasn't had much of a chance to come up. He's always stuck in the minors. The one game he came up from, he was basically invisible. That's a guy I think that could be looking for a possible trade partner when the Lightning are getting close to the trade deadline. I don't think he's a guy you could trade outright because he's been on waivers so many times. But it's an interesting situation because the Lightning have a couple of extra defenders as well, with Bogosian being back now. What's that?
Pair him up with Cal Foote, send him out the door.
I think it's a good idea.
We talked about that earlier, and that could be a potential avenue.
You have a surplus of defensemen. You've got what I think is a glaring hole on the bottom four. Once Cirelli comes back, bottom four, bottom line. Once Cirelli comes back, maybe that'll shore up the third line. But I think a trade has to be strongly looked at. ABB, it would be a person that I think for some team might be really right for them if they're not really trying to compete for a playoff spot. He also might be a trade that teams would consider just to help other players in the AHL develop, because he's an amazing player when it comes to the A. There's no doubt about that. His point production
100%.
is and it's mostly assists. It's not like he's skating around doing it by himself. He's helping other players be better for themselves, and that's a great asset to have in your minor league club, so you can help develop some of those players to play with the bigs, playing the bigs with some strong passing. I think it's going to be a good package if you can put them together. And then, I know you're saying that you're not too worried about the bottom two lines, but it's a good question to start talking about now as we start getting deeper. And the deadline, it's going to come up quick. It's going to be coming around pretty quick, and I think you'll see that we're going to have a conversation before you know it, where that's all that the media is going to be talking about.
And one last thing about the third line is, how did we get to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals? We had a wicked third line for 3 years. For 2 of those years, it was, one solid third line with Gord, Goudreau, and Coleman. That one will forever live in my heart as the best third line in history. But even last year, it was Cirelli, Hagel, and Nick Paul. Did he kind of played with them? It wasn't as solid as the magnificent 3 from the last 2 years, but it was still a great rolling, hard, heavy hitting, puck possession, puck hog third line. If we don't have that this year, not that I'm saying that it's impossible, but that's kind of been like why that was why people doubted us even doing anything last year in the playoffs, because they're missing their entire third line. They lost an entire line. How can we expect them to go back? I don't want to be a fear monger here or anything like that, but if things don't really start getting going, if we don't have a solid third line in the playoffs, Jake would like to speak. Hey.
No, you're right, Matt, and I was gonna bring that up there in a little bit, but that third line is big, and that goes back into the trade thing, right? If maybe you package ABB and Cal Foot and a Belmar or something like that, and make a trade for that extra third line guy. We saw the Lightning do it when the Lightning traded Matthew Joseph. Nobody really saw that coming. And then they flipped him for Nick Paul, who's been unbelievable.
He's the best player in the NHL.
Again. Yeah. It's going to be something to watch, though. It's going to be interesting, and we will definitely have all the coverage right here for you as soon as we know more and as more rumors start to come out. Last thing I want to do before we preview the month of December coming up here is kind of just quickly recap the month of November, because we talked about, guys, if you remember when a couple episodes ago, is that we said the Lightning need to have a good month of November because they had a ton of home games. There was only 3-4 total road games in this one. And I think the Lightning did a very good job in the month of November. They won a majority of their home games, even the ones they lost. They had a couple of overtime. They had one overtime loss, and they had a shootout, or one shootout loss, sorry. But overall, very, very well in the month of November. And I think that needs to be talked about.
November was going to be a big month for them just because of how many home games there were, like you said. And in the end, it worked out pretty well. The one thing I really wanted to see, and I mentioned it in the beginning of the month, was consistency. And I really don't think that they've achieved that. It wasn't a consistent play for the team. I would rather have traded a couple of the wins, even though they look good from the standing standpoint, a couple of the wins for more tightly played games, especially when it comes to cleaning up the defensive zone. But look, as of right now, they've got the points to stay in the playoff hunt. There's no concerns in terms of like being eliminated in December, right? They just keep on this pace. And I'll say that everything gets masked when you're getting wins, right? But again, when it comes to November, that consistency just wasn't there, and hopefully that's something that they can start cleaning up here coming into next month.
And what was yesterday's loss? It was a good loss, in my opinion. Again, I'm not tearing the house down or anything like that. I know Jake's, shaking his head.
It was the Boston, so that's never a good loss.
Yes, but right. If you ignore who was playing and whatever, you're like, dang, both great teams played a great game, playoff style game. That's a game nobody likes to lose, but it's like, man, when we lost in that fashion, I guess it wasn't a 5-0 blowout or nothing like that. You're not seeing the same mistakes we've made earlier in the season. A lot of our players just look better individually, and all we can do is hope for growth from that, especially as players start coming back. Of course, we're definitely going to lose a couple, knock on wood, throughout injury throughout the year. You just hope everything is clicking at the right time. One thing I'm not at all concerned about, but one thing I'm warning a lot of Bruins fans are, hey, don't peak at the right time. You gotta, like we all learned, don't peak at the wrong time. Like, peak in the playoffs. So we know the Lightning, they can save their skill. They can save everything that they need until April and May and June. So again, they're not huge concerns of mine, but to me, I'm happy with the progression I've seen so far from the team from October to November and now heading into December.
December coming in here. As this recording is November 30th, but the next game will officially be in the month of December. And guys, you know what December is all about? It's Christmas. And by the way, if you need a gift for the Lightning fan in your life, be sure to head over to shop.rblrsports.com to check out all of the awesome merch that we've got over there. It's not just Lightning merch too, Bucks, Rays, Rowdies merch, you name it, we've got it. You can head over there to shop.rblr and you can go and use code BOLTS for 10% off your order. So be sure to head over there. Christmas time right around the corner. Great time to go check out the awesome merch that we have. Let's preview these games and then wrap things up here in just a moment. So coming up, we got 2 games before our next show. So lighter on the games here, but Philadelphia Flyers on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern in Philly. And then the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday at Amalie Arena at 7 p.m. Eastern. That'll be the start of a 4-game homestand. Or no, I'm sorry. That'll be the start of a six home game stand for the Lightning. So another big homestand coming up for the Bolts in the month of December here. So only 2 games, but the game I'm circling on my calendar, guys, is the one against Toronto. We mentioned Stamkos at 999 points. I kind of hope he doesn't score against Philly. I would love for him to score against Toronto, his hometown team, and at Amalie Arena in front of the home crowd. But that is going to be one to watch, and more specifically, Steven Stamkos, either of these games, to see if he can get that career point number 1,000.
I dig it, Jake. I really dig it, and that's I'm manifesting it. That's what's going to happen. I know I manifested last week, but I did it wrong. Don't worry about that. This week, it's happening against Toronto. It's going to be on home ice. It's going to be against his childhood team, one that he was, threatened to go to back in 2016, the summer of Stamkos. I think that is just written in the stars. As nice and, vengeful as it would have been against Boston, I think against Toronto at home will be so much better. And not to mention, Adam Wild from the Steve Dangle podcast saying that Steven Stamkos is a power play merchant, blah, blah, blah. Scoring 1,000 points against your team, that's a good way to make him eat some crow. So that's just the other layer of it for me. So.
Yeah, I love storylines. As I've said multiple times, that would be a great one to have for the Toronto game against the Flyers. I mean, they're not playing exceptionally well. Hopefully, it's just a blowout. Get to move on. One of those ones where you can watch it without having to be too concerned. I think you might get it there just because of how weak the Flyers have been playing as of late. Coming in for Toronto, they are second in the division, third in the conference for points. They're not quite as good as Boston by the standings, but still a very solid playoff team. I'm looking forward to this game to see, again, if the Lightning can bring back the style of play that they just brought to Boston, if they can bring that to the game against the Leafs and see how well they do, and it kind of gives you an idea of how well they're really truly playing on the season. That's the one I'm really looking forward to.
The Lightning always tend to play the Flyers really weirdly too. I think we talked about this last time when the Lightning played the Flyers. It's always like a 6-7 game in overtime. There's always something weird with those Philly games. So we'll see what happens. They
And
did start
just
off hot. They beat us earlier in the season, remember, as well.
and the Lightning just kind of not have issues, but they're always interesting games against Tortorella teams in general.
That's true. So
Never boring against Torts.
hey, we should have 2 good games to talk about next time when we come back on this episode. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this one and listening with us. If you can do us a favor, wherever you're listening, hit that subscribe button, give us that 5-star rating, the follow, whatever it is on whatever platform you're listening. And we really appreciate it. It really helps us out. Don't forget to follow us at RBLR Sports on all the social media platforms as well, so you don't miss out on future episodes just like this one. And don't forget to listen to our other podcasts as well, covering the Rays, the Rowdies, the Bucks, all that good stuff. Those guys do fantastic work over there as well. But thank you guys so much for listening. And we'll talk to you next week. Go Bolts.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.